Discover the timeless wisdom of the great Sufi master Abdul Qadir al-Gilani. This is the story of the prayer that opens doors you thought were permanently closed. There's a prayer so powerful that it opens doors you thought were permanently closed. Abdul Qadir al-Gilani, known as the Sultan of Saints, discovered this secret in 12th century Baghdad. Kings sought his counsel, impossible situations resolved. Overnight, lives transformed in ways that defied logic. But here's what made this prayer different. It wasn't about asking God for things. It was about aligning with the divine names that govern reality itself. His full name was Abdul Qadir al-Gilani, but throughout the Islamic world, he's known simply as Ghaus al-Azam, the greatest helper. Born in 1077 in northern Persia, he would become the most revered saint in Islamic history, the founder of the Qadiriyya Sufi order, and the master of what can only be called spiritual technology. But Abdul Qadir's path to sainthood began with failure. As a young man, he came to Baghdad to study Islamic law and theology. He was brilliant, devout, and ambitious. Yet, despite years of intense study, he felt spiritually empty. He knew about God intellectually, but he had never experienced divine power directly. Everything changed when he encountered an old Sufi master who asked him a simple question. "Young man, you know all the names of God, but do you know how to activate them?" Abdul Qadir was confused. Activate them? They're just names, descriptions of God's qualities. The old master smiled. Each divine name is a key to a specific aspect of divine power. When you know how to use these keys properly, you don't just pray to God. You become a conscious participant in divine creativity. This conversation would revolutionize Abdul Qadir's understanding of prayer and set him on the path that would make him the most powerful saint in Islamic history. The old master explained something that most religious scholars had missed. The 99 names of God aren't just descriptions. They're active forces that govern every aspect of reality. Each name represents a divine quality that's constantly operating in the universe. When you align yourself properly with these qualities, you become a conduit for divine power. Ar-Rahman governs mercy, the master taught. Al-Qahar governs divine dominance. Al-Fatah governs divine opening. When you invoke these names with proper understanding and spiritual alignment, you activate the corresponding divine quality in your situation. Abdul Qadir spent the next several years learning what he would later call the science of divine names. This wasn't about memorizing prayers or performing rituals. It was about understanding how consciousness interfaces with the creative force of the universe. He discovered that each divine name has specific requirements for activation. Some require complete surrender of personal will. Others require absolute confidence in divine power. Still others require a particular kind of love or a specific level of spiritual purification. Most people pray with their ego, Abdul Qadir would later teach. They ask God to fulfill their personal desires. But the divine names only respond to consciousness that has transcended personal agenda and aligned with divine will. This is why Abdul Qadir's approach to prayer was so different from conventional religious practice. He didn't pray for things. He prayed from divine qualities. Instead of asking God to solve his problems, he invoked the divine names that were already the solution to every problem. For example, when faced with a situation requiring guidance, he wouldn't pray, "Oh God, please guide me." Instead, he would invoke Ya Rashid, the guide, until his consciousness became so aligned with divine guidance that the right action became obvious. When confronting injustice, he wouldn't ask God to punish wrongdoers. He would invoke Ya Adil, the just, until divine justice manifested naturally through the situation itself. When healing was needed, he would invoke Ya Shafi, the healer, until healing energy flowed through him with such power that miraculous recoveries became commonplace. The results were extraordinary. People began traveling from across the known world to witness what they called Abdul Qadir's miracles. But he insisted these weren't miracles. They were the natural result of proper spiritual technology. When consciousness aligns perfectly with a divine quality, he taught, that quality must manifest. This isn't magic. This is how the universe actually works. But here's where Abdul Qadir's teaching becomes practical for modern seekers. He developed specific methods for achieving this alignment. The key, he discovered, lay in understanding what he called the 3 levels of invocation. The first level is verbal repetition. You repeat a divine name with your tongue, focusing your mind on its meaning. This creates initial resonance with that divine quality, but it's just the beginning. The second level is heart absorption. You repeat the name until it moves from your mind into your heart. At this level, you begin to feel the quality the name represents. If you're invoking Ar-Rahman, the merciful, you actually begin to feel divine mercy flowing through you. The third level is essence identification. You continue until the boundary between yourself and the divine quality dissolves completely. You don't just feel mercy, you become a manifestation of divine mercy. You don't just experience guidance, you become a channel for divine guidance. At the third level, Abdul Qadir taught, you are no longer invoking the divine name. The divine name is invoking itself through you. This is when the impossible becomes possible. When consciousness completely aligns with the divine quality, that quality expresses itself through your circumstances with unlimited power. Abdul Qadir gave a specific example. If you invoke Al-Fatah, the opener, until you reach the third level, every door that needs to open will open. Not because you force them to open, but because divine opening is now expressing itself through your entire situation. But Abdul Qadir made a crucial distinction. This isn't about manipulating God to get what you want. It's about discovering what God wants to express through you, then becoming a perfect channel for that expression. The secret, he said, is that God is already trying to express every divine quality through every situation. Most people block this expression with their ego-driven agendas. The saint removes these blocks and becomes transparent to divine will. This is why Abdul Qadir could say something that sounds impossible. Every prayer is answered before you pray it. Divine qualities are already present in every situation. Prayer simply aligns you with what's already there. During his 40 years of teaching in Baghdad, Abdul Qadir documented hundreds of cases where this approach produced what appeared to be miraculous results. Incurable diseases healed, impossible debts forgiven, enemies became friends overnight, hopeless situations transformed completely. But he insisted the real miracle wasn't the external change. It was the internal transformation that made such changes inevitable. When you align with divine qualities, he taught, you don't just change your circumstances. You become a different person, one through whom divine will flows naturally. He developed specific practices for working with different divine names based on the type of situation you're facing. For situations requiring mercy, he taught intensive invocation of Ar-Rahman combined with acts of kindness until your heart became so soft that divine mercy flooded through you to everyone around you. For situations requiring strength, he prescribed invocation of Al-Qawi, the strong, while engaging in acts of courage until divine strength became your natural state. For situations requiring provision, he recommended invoking Ar-Razak, the provider, while practicing absolute trust in divine abundance until worry about material needs became impossible. But Abdul Qadir's most powerful teaching was about Ya Latif, the gentle, the subtle. He discovered that this name has the power to open pathways that human planning could never create. Al-Latif, he taught, governs the realm of impossible possibilities. When you invoke this name with complete surrender, solutions appear that your mind could never have imagined. He told the story of a man who came to him drowning in debt, facing prison with no apparent way out. Abdul Qadir taught him to invoke Ya Latif each morning while walking and surrendering all attachment to how the situation could be resolved. Within 3 months, a series of seemingly coincidental events unfolded. An old business partner contacted him about a forgotten investment. A piece of property he'd inherited but forgotten about was purchased by the government for a road project. And a skill he developed as a hobby suddenly became valuable in a new market that had just emerged. This is how Al-Latif works, Abdul Qadir explained. Divine subtlety creates pathways that appear impossible until they manifest. But perhaps Abdul Qadir's most profound insight was about timing. He discovered that each divine name has optimal times for invocation based on cosmic and personal cycles. Ar-Rahman is most responsive at dawn, he taught. Al-Qahar works powerfully during full moons. As-Sabur, the patient, opens new possibilities during times of apparent delay. He developed a complete system for matching divine names to life situations, personality types, and even specific hours of the day and night. Modern neuroscience is beginning to understand some of what Abdul Qadir discovered centuries ago. Research shows that repetitive prayer and meditation create measurable changes in brain structure, particularly in areas associated with compassion, focus, and stress reduction. But Abdul Qadir's insights go far deeper than neuroscience. He understood that consciousness itself is creative, and that when consciousness aligns perfectly with divine qualities, it becomes a transformative force in the world. Near the end of his life, Abdul Qadir summarized his teaching in a way that reveals its ultimate secret. The divine names are not separate from you. They are the deepest truth of what you are. When you invoke a divine name properly, you are not calling upon something external. You are awakening a divine quality that has always been present in your essential nature. God has 99 names, he said, because humans have the capacity to manifest 99 divine qualities. The purpose of life is to discover which divine qualities want to express themselves through your unique form of consciousness. This is why Abdul Qadir's method of prayer was so effective. He wasn't trying to convince God to change divine will. He was discovering divine will and becoming its perfect expression. When you know which divine quality wants to manifest through your situation, he taught, and you invoke the corresponding name until you become transparent to that quality, the impossible becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The prayer that opens impossible doors isn't about the words you say. It's about the consciousness you become. When you align completely with divine qualities, reality reshapes itself around your spiritual state. Abdul Qadir's final teaching was the simplest and most profound. Stop asking God for things. Start asking God what divine quality wants to express itself through you. Then invoke the corresponding name until you become that quality in human form. The door that seems impossible to open, he whispered to his students in his final days, is always open from the inside. The key has always been in your hand. The divine names are simply reminders of who you really are. This is the secret of the prayer that opens impossible doors. It doesn't change God's mind, it reveals God's heart. And God's heart, abiding, always providing, always guiding, always healing. The only question is whether you're aligned enough to let these divine qualities flow through you. When you are, every door that needs to open opens, not through force, but through the irresistible power of divine love expressing itself as your life.